Cranes are mesmerizing. Are they talking to one another in flight? Is that the lonely cry of a colt looking for its parents? Are they announcing themselves to the world as they fly by? Where would we be without the sound of cranes? Many of the world's saurus cranes make their way between Tonle Sap and Cambodia's northern plains where they breed. Once flourishing, they're now threatened in Southeast Asia by farming and environmental degradation. In North America, we're blessed with uncounted millions of another species, the sandhill crane. Others, like the whooping crane, live here but cling to a threatened existence. Kate Collie, painter and a therapist, was entranced by cranes 30 years ago as a symbol of recovery.
My mother loved nature and children. When new books arrived at the library, she'd bring them home to read to us at bedtime. It was from Sadako and the 1,000 Cranes that we got the idea that folding 1,000 origami cranes could bring extraordinary results. When I was diagnosed with MS, my mother organized the family to make 1,000 cranes for me. I too folded them that year. Why not believe in the legend? By the end of the year, we had 1,000 cranes, and I was symptom-free. Not too long after that, back in my painting studio, I had finished a project about art therapy and Vietnam veterans with PTSD and needed a new theme, preferably one related to an environmental success story. What would that be, though? In 1993, I came across Susan Brownmiller's account of the almost magical return of saurus cranes to Tram Chim in the Mekong Delta region of southern Vietnam. I was interested in this story, a story of environmental restoration against all odds. Vietnam was considered the world's poorest country at the time, having been drained, by the French and then the American wars, and yet the people of the Mekong Delta did something considered scientifically impossible. They restored tropical wetland by manually planting trees and building dikes. The cranes of the Delta hadn't been seen for more than 20 years. They returned as soon as a small patch of wetland had been restored. Once cranes had returned, scientists and crane lovers took notice. Differences were put aside as an assorted group of experts created a wetland management plan for Tram Chim to accommodate rice production, grazing, melaleuca plantations, the needs of humans, and wildlife protection with a focus on cranes. If this could be achieved in the world's poorest country, how could wealthier nations keep pretending such things were not possible? The Mekong is called River of 9 Dragons because of its 9 branches that twist across the delta toward the South China Sea. Segments of this braided network became letters of an imaginary alphabet, paired with rhyme patterns from local poetry. The river is the lifeblood of the region, the reserve a haven.
Saurus cranes left the Mekong region a few years ago, chased out by industrial farming and a loss of habitat. Upstream, the river is dammed in China and Laos, and soon in Cambodia. Might the cranes return? Maybe, in time. Aldo Leopold said it most clearly 75 years ago in his Sand County Almanac. Our ability to perceive quality in nature begins, as in art, with the pretty. It expands through successive stages of the beautiful to values yet uncaptured by language. The quality of cranes lies, I think, in this higher gamut, as yet beyond the reach of words. The flight of sandhill cranes fills me with wonder. Their wings stretch out, now compressed, now spread toward opposite horizons. I watch with the pilot's eyes as each one slows in midair, feet down, wings tipped up, and I wonder where, among so many others on the ground, this one will land. The feathers on the back of the wings ruffle turbulently as the crane stalls, legs bent to soften the blow of the landing. I'm in awe. At sunrise in New Mexico, entire squadrons filled the sky, approaching from the south. Along the Rio Grande, I watched as the young one flew overhead, feet paddling hilariously as if it were a duck out of water. On the ground, males flapped their wings at each other, practicing the dance they would perform with females later in the season. They roosted in shallow water near the lakeshore, inches deep, providing protection from predators. Their cacophonous gack-gack-gack would suddenly cease when a hunter shotgun went off nearby. The birds knew enough to keep their distance from intruders shaped like me. Moments later, the gabbling resumed. At sunset, the birds returned, gliding back to their temporary home on the water. A photographer next to me said over and over, "They're just so beautiful. Just so beautiful."
In early spring, migrating sandhill cranes converge in the wide shallows of the Platte River in central Nebraska, as they always have. They linger for some weeks, feeding in cornfields by day, roosting on sandbars at night. They come from as far south as Mexico on their way to points north. Some go to the tip of the Aleutian Islands. Thousands come, hundreds of thousands, enough to darken the sky. I was in Nebraska one April before all the cranes had left to head north. I wanted to see them. A kind relative took me to the river one evening to watch them come in to roost at dusk. We had arranged to watch from a blind. A man with a flashlight greeted us at the turnoff and asked in a hushed voice, "Are you here for a blind viewing?" The contradiction in that question echoed the odd overlay of present and distant past we were about to experience. I have to believe the cranes share news and gossip during the stopover on the Platte, but how would you ever know if that's true? How can we know what they're saying as they fly and call out in loud, haunting voices? As dusk deepened and I peered into the cranes' lives, I felt I was being taken back in time. Millions and millions of years back in time. As we look into the future, dare we imagine that cranes will still darken the sky 50 years from now?
Cranes have been on Earth for maybe 10 million years longer than we have. They enchant us, mark our seasons, and inspire awe with their grandeur. In Vietnam last century, human livelihoods were protected by efforts to help the cranes. Can we let cranes protect us again? If we can safeguard the wetlands and flyways that they need, we stand a chance of preserving the air and water that we will need to survive into the future.